In my sophomore year of high school, a close friend of mine was murdered. Going back, freshman year when I was in homeroom, I became friends with the girl who sat right in front of me. Her name was Deanna Wright. We came from the same neighborhood and both worked at pizza shops a few blocks away. One night, I remember she texted me, asking if I wanted to go do something together. This was way before everyone had unlimited cell phone plans. I had the Nokia that was basically just a brick, and I had to pay for every minute we used to text. If it was short, we could get away with not having to open it, and therefore being charged the 5 cents per minute. She told me she'd had a fight with her mother, and felt like going out and smoking some weed. I had to work and wouldn't be done until close to 1 a.m. Since I needed some gas money, I told her I couldn't blow off work that night, but I might come out and hang out with her afterwards. She grumbled and said okay, and to text her when I was done with work to see where she was at, because she couldn't decide what she was going to do yet. At 1:15, as soon as I got off, I texted her, but I didn't get a reply. No big deal, I thought. Probably she just went to sleep. So Saturday, I text her again. Nothing. Sunday. Nothing. Again, I thought she was probably just grounded. That's why she'd been mad to begin with. She was grounded, went out, got grounded again, left and went out again. That's how it usually went. Monday though, when I came into school, I heard the teacher make a sudden announcement. Sorry to inform you guys, but Deanna is missing. Her family reported her missing after she left. She went out and never came home, so if you know anything, please contact the police. The teacher said all of this in a despondent tone. My stomach dropped instantly. My fingers tingled. I couldn't believe it. Apparently, that night she ended up hanging out with a guy she'd met working at the pizza shop. Everything was going alright at first. She was a beautiful girl, she was a model, so we all know what he was thinking. We're not sure how things exactly went down, but we know she was drugged, raped, and strangled. Then her vile murderer decided to cut her body into small pieces, put her in a steel drum, and light her on fire. Every day, I think about that night over and over. Should I have gone with her? Would that really have made any difference? Or would he simply have killed us both? Her father was an FBI agent, so it truly goes to show that if someone is evil and wants to kill you, then nothing, and I mean not a single thing, will be able to get in their way. In the spirit of Halloween, I'll share an incident that happened to me last October. It was 10 a.m. on a weekday, and I had the day off. So, I decided to go to the grocery store and get some pumpkins to carve. I did my shopping with no problems, and didn't notice anything off, since it was earlier in the day and the other shoppers were all elderly. I didn't suspect anything would be either. I bought 3 large pumpkins and had them in a cart to put in the trunk of my car. As I was putting the first large pumpkin inside, holding it with one arm and opening the trunk with the other, with my back to the parking lot, I felt someone tug the pumpkin out of my arm backwards. I spun around right away and threw that pumpkin in the process, only to see 2 men now directly behind me. I'm a very small woman, so immediately I felt in danger. The one man, who I assume must be the one who first grabbed at me, made an attempt to scream something at me in a language I didn't understand. He grabbed me once again. I pushed the cart with the remaining pumpkins at the 2 men as hard as I could and hopped in my car to lock the doors and drive away. As soon as I got in the car going, the 2 men jumped into a white brand new Dodge Charger with temp plates and sped out of the parking lot right after me. The street we pulled out onto was a busy 4-lane business district. You couldn't safely speed through this. That didn't matter to them though, as they weaved in and out of traffic to try and run me off the road. Their driving was so erratic that another driver even attempted to box the Charger in themselves. It didn't matter much anyway. They simply went into oncoming traffic to follow me. Meanwhile, I threw on my left turn signal and made a quick turn into a donut and coffee chain I regularly frequented. Next to this coffee chain was a pizza shop that was not yet open. I noticed the Charger had pulled into the pizza chain and was waiting for me to pull out of the coffee chain parking lot. I frantically told the employee what was going on through the drive-thru window while I ordered a snack. Really, I was just waiting in the drive-thru because I didn't want to pull out yet. The coffee chain knew me very well, and on this day, the manager went above and beyond the call of duty. She called the police for me, who told her to have me pull around to the window. She did so, knowing I would be in full view of the Charger. Because of this, she came outside to stand in between us with the biggest rolling pin I'd ever seen in my life. She stared those men down like my own mother would have. The cops came swiftly and took statements from all of us. The Charger, surprisingly, was still there. The police searched it. One officer told me they'd pulled tarp and rope from the trunk and were now treating this as a trafficking attempt or something. Both men refused to answer any questions and were promptly arrested. I don't know for sure what their intent was, but I live in a sanctuary city, mostly with people from Nepal or Bhutan, and I've never had a scary issue before. I love my neighborhood and the people in it, but I didn't recognize these men, nor their car frequenting the neighborhood ever before. That day, I bought everyone working at that coffee chain a gift certificate for a nice fancy massage as a thank you for protecting me. I still tip them every morning with extra, even a year later. To start with, my parents have always taught me to be very independent. I live 30-ish minutes away from New York City by train, so I was taught not to be afraid of the subway systems. I learned very quickly how to find my own way around New York City and my town in Jersey via public transportation. I always checked in with my parents as well, whether I was going to practice or to a movie with my friends. It didn't really matter. I made sure to always check in, so it was never really a big deal. Anyway, a few weeks prior to the incident I'm about to talk about, the internet in our house was not working. I needed the computer to finish a research paper. Since the library was closed, it was a weekend, so this was typical of my town. My older brother took me to this internet cafe a few blocks away from our house. While there, my brother was talking to his friend Charles and introduced us both to each other. Well, little did I know that this Charles guy, who was only about 17 years old, was about to shortly save my life. Oh, I almost forgot an important detail. The cafe was on the main street of my town, and there was a bus stop about a block away from it. A few weeks after meeting Charles, my friends invited me to go bowling in the city with them. My parents said it was fine. I was 14, so obviously I still had to ask for permission to go into the city alone. I was well on my way around noon. We bowled, grabbed some pizza, talked about my friend's new puppy, all the typical girl things. Everything was actually going really great. That was until I started making my way back home. At 3 p.m., there were some delays with the subway system. Instead of waiting it out there, I decided to try and take a different subway home. It would drop me off at the Newark Penn station, and I would be one bus ride away from my home. No problem. Just a little detour. At 3:15 p.m., I got on that subway when I noticed an older man staring at me. It creeped me out, but that was nothing new in New York City. I simply tried my best to ignore him. At 3:50 p.m., though, I arrived at Newark Penn station, and this man saw me get up to go. He made eye contact with me and smiled, then hurried to catch up behind me. Mind you, I was a young, small girl at this time, so I was a very easy target. He was being creepy, so I walked fast and tried to get lost in the crowd. The doors opened and I weaved my way in between people. This dude must have had like 40/40 vision or something, because as soon as I arrived at my bus stop, I turned around only to see he was still right behind me. 4-ish p.m., I'm sitting next to an elderly-looking lady at the bus stop. The creepy dude was now pacing back and forth, about 10 feet away from me. He was looking at me unblinking, pacing back and forth. Every part of my body was saying, "Run now. This man is bad news." Still though, there was nowhere for me to go. At least sitting next to this kind older lady made me feel a little bit safer. I took my phone out to text my mom, only to realize it was dead. Wonderful. Thankfully, more people had now arrived at the stop, and I felt a lot better. There were now a lot of witnesses around. The man couldn't do anything, but he was still staring and pacing back and forth. At 4:15 p.m., the bus arrived finally. I quickly rushed in and sat as close as possible to the driver. I don't know why I didn't tell the bus driver what was happening. I guess I was young, scared, and naive, and didn't want to burden the driver with knowing this. Stupid, I know that now. My stop was the very last one, so I was thinking to myself, well, this guy has got to get off the bus before me. There's no way he's going to stay on till the very end just to follow me. Many stops later, the man was still on the bus. He was also doing this very creepy thing. Whenever the bus stopped, he would observe if I was going to get up with everyone else, and then when I stayed, instead of getting off the bus, he would scoot closer and closer to the front where I was. There were fewer and fewer people on, and I realized this guy was going to get off whenever I did. This meant that if I got off at my real stop, he would simply follow me home, find out where I lived, or maybe I'd never get home in the first place. At 5 p.m., there were now only 2 stops separating my house and I. This guy, a single lady, and I were the last ones inside the bus. I decided I was going to get out early because there was no way I was going to let this guy know where I lived. I got off a stop early. He saw and followed me right away. I did my best to pick up speed, but he easily kept pace with me. I started running, only for him to start running after me. In my panic, I suddenly remembered that cafe. It would be closing soon, but I was only a single block away. I ran for my life to the cafe, with the guy right on my tail. As I was approaching, I saw Charles standing outside, just happening to be in the middle of locking up the place. He took one look at me and knew there was something wrong. I guess he could see the fear in my face and the older man running after me. I rushed over to Charles, who immediately pushed me inside the cafe and locked the door behind us. Luckily, he was fast on his feet, and the creep had been locked outside. My heart was pounding. I told Charles this random man had been following me across 3 different towns, and I was extremely scared. He called the cops. The man was just staring inside the cafe. I was staring back at him, now protected by the locked yet clear glass door. I had to remember all his details. The creepy dude stared and smiled for a minute, then simply walked away as if nothing had ever happened. Little did me or the man know that Charles' uncle was a cop in our town. A few minutes later, the cops rushed in force. After describing the vivid details of the man, it only took them a minute to catch this creep still walking down Main Street. We later found out this creepy guy had a warrant out for his arrest for armed robbery and had prior accounts of sexual assault as well. Had it not been for Charles that day, I don't know what would have happened to me. I was really grateful to him for saving my life, and no, this did not deter me from public transportation or exploring the city alone. My parents did freak out a bit, of course, and bought me some mace and a taser. As an adult, I now travel all over the world. Sometimes alone, but I'm always hyper aware of my surroundings, all because of what that man did at 14 years old. I'm an 18-year-old female living in a small town in Michigan. When this incident took place, I had been working a few hours a week at a small pizzeria. It was in my town, and I had been working there for about a year when my boss decided to go on a vacation. She and her family lived in an apartment below the restaurant, and 2 other apartments were situated above it. In order to get to these apartments, you had to go to the back of the building and down a sketchy set of stairs. There, down a further slope, you would find her door, and stairs leading up to the other apartments above. Beyond that, there was a yard and then some woods. I think it's important to mention that there was absolutely no reason to be behind the restaurant unless you were trying to enter these apartments. Now, I usually worked with my mom because we got stuff done easily together and I hated answering phones. One night though, my mom was feeling ill, so I had to work with another lady. She was very sweet but not exactly super efficient. This meant I was working a lot harder to keep up and getting a bit agitated when she told me we needed some Parmesan. I agreed to go grab it from the store just down the road if she promised not to make me answer the phones for the rest of our shift. There was only about 2 hours left anyway, and those were normally slow hours as well, so I didn't think it would really matter that much. As I was getting into my SUV, I saw a man pull into the small parking lot in a beat-up car and park near the back. He was lanky and wearing oil-stained shop clothes, which was and still is totally normal around here. He got out and retrieved a bag from his trunk, then started to head down those back stairs. I knew for sure this guy was not a renter because I'd never seen him before, and the renters frequently ordered pizza. I guessed it was possible he was a friend of one of the renters, but something about this did not seem right. It was around 9:30 at night, and one of the renters was a single mom. The others were two brothers with mental health issues, and they were pretty antisocial to anyone they didn't know. I was getting bad vibes from this man. I grabbed my knife from the center console and tucked it into my sleeve. And call me paranoid, but there'd been a lot of car fires and break-ins around that time, so I was nervous to go anywhere unarmed. It might have been a stupid thing to do, but I genuinely considered my boss and the people that worked there my friends, and I didn't want this guy to hurt any of the renters or steal from any of the apartments either. I decided to sneak up and see what he was doing, just in case he was a man with ill intention. I got out of my car and walked quietly over. There were motion-activated lights, so I could easily see what the man was doing. He was fiddling with this old keyring and seemed to be trying to get into my boss's apartment. "Hey, what are you doing?" I asked loudly so my coworker could hopefully hear me through the open back door. The man was clearly startled. He smiled and told me he worked for my boss's husband and he was there to feed the dog and let it out. His smile was way too creepy though. It was the kind a liar gives when they're trying really hard to convince you. My boss did have a dog, and her husband did own a fabrication shop, so his story seemed to check out on a surface level, but something had me still not convinced. I decided to go get the cheese and check again when I went back. "Okay, well, let me know if you need help with something." I tried to sound as normal as possible, but something was seriously weirding me out here. I hustled at the store and rushed back to work. I'd been gone about 10 minutes, and when I got back, surprisingly, he was already gone. I was still feeling something was off though, and I was feeling bad for the dog who'd been shut in a good portion of the day. I decided to text my boss and let her know what was going on. Fast forward 2 hours, and I was now on my way home. I got to my door when I decided to check Facebook. As I was scrolling downwards, I saw something that made my stomach drop instantly. It was a picture of my boss with her dog at the beach from earlier that very day. I called my boss and then the police to file a report. It turned out the man had been fired by my boss's husband earlier that week for making an inappropriate comment about his underage daughter and repeatedly harassing other female staff. This guy had planned some sort of revenge scheme. Luckily, he didn't know their family had left for vacation. His bag was full of tools and knives. During questioning, he told them the only reason he'd left right away was because he thought I'd stayed behind to watch him. Thankfully, he went to jail soon after, and for a couple of other things he'd been wanted for previously. It still creeps me out to this day, and I hate to think what might have happened if their family had really been home. So I spend most of my summers in Australia, helping out on my uncle's farm. In the family, it's just him, my female cousin who's never home because of ballet school, and my male cousin. My brother and I were there last summer when I was 14. I got up in the morning and walked into the kitchen, seeing a dude underneath the computer desk. "Oh, he's just fixing the computer, don't mind him. He'll be done in about an hour or so," my uncle told me. My brother and my cousin had gone surfing, while my uncle was going to pick something up from the store. I was getting weird vibes from this bloke I'd just been left alone with. He kinda vaguely looked like the guy from Smash Mouth, but with a patchier beard and much thinner hair. He kept on tinkering away at the computer, and I silently slinked back down the hall. I wanted some privacy. I opened my female cousin's bedroom door and walked in. I put her music on softly and left after I slammed the door. I then crept down the hall a little more into my cousin's room. I rolled underneath his bed and started messaging back and forth with my boyfriend back home. I let my boyfriend know what was happening. I was still weirded out because I'm inherently suspicious of any man or woman I don't know. We were making jokes to calm me down about him flying down here and beating this random repairman up. That was when I began to hear footsteps echoing down the hall. The bathroom was right next to the computer, and the only thing down here was all of our bedrooms. What could he possibly want here? I heard my female cousin's door open and him skulking about inside. Since she had a laminate floor, I could hear him walking around. Her bathroom door creaked open. I heard him pull it open and begin searching around, then eventually leave the room. He was definitely looking for something, or for someone. My cousin's door then creaked open, and I heard him step inside the room I was currently hiding in. Thankfully, my cousin had a lot of shit under his bed, so the man was not able to find me. The man was muttering to himself as he opened the bathroom, the closet, and even searched under the dresser. Then he left again, walking all around the house. I was definitely freaked out at this point, but it started to get way worse. A car pulled up outside out of nowhere. It didn't have the familiar sound of my uncle's truck either. All of a sudden, the man's phone rang, and he picked it up. "Nah, man, I can't find her. I think she left or something." There was a brief pause as I began to furiously message my boyfriend, thoroughly and utterly spooked. Fine, but they're gonna be back any minute, so you gotta move fast." I couldn't believe this was happening. A bunch of people entered the house. I couldn't tell how many footsteps I heard, but I learned later it was 2 different sets. Stupidly, I rolled out from under the bed so I could grab the phone on my cousin's nightstand. I couldn't use mine because it was a Canadian phone, and fuck roaming charges, you know? I was about to dial 911 when I had that sudden realization. Oh fuck, man, I'm in a different country. What's the number for the police? Basically, I'm holding this pizza-shaped phone, thinking, oh shit, when 3 men walk into the room. "More repair guys?" I asked them, trying very hard to play dumb. At this moment, my boyfriend was messaging me like mad because I just sent him a text, about to call 911. I might die, so if I do, delete my internet history for me. I hadn't messaged him back since. I was holding that phone, looking pale and shaky. That obviously is not good, because they knew I knew what they were up to. They filed into the room, and I've never been more glad to hear, "What the fuck are you doing?" My brother rushed in soaking wet, holding a surfboard and looking very menacing. These dudes were all cornered as hell. They started making excuses, and by the time their sorry asses were done trying to explain why they'd trapped a scared-looking teenage girl in a bedroom all alone, my overprotective uncle showed up, holding a bag of milk and some frozen curly fries. He flipped his shit and began beating them with the fries. Long story short, I almost got terrorized by 3 older men. But in the end, thanks to my brother and uncle, they ended up looking like a child with purple and red crayons had gotten bored and drawn all over them.